فاسدة.
Welcome to Talking in Stations. I am your host, Matterall. Today we're going to be talking about war. We're at the precipice of war, and it looks like something is going to happen in a pretty major way in EVE Online. You're seeing the combination of many different influencers and alliances and coalitions converging on one fight that appears to be between Legacy Coalition and Winter Coalition. So we've invited a lot of people to examine how this started, what parties are involved, what motivates them, and then what we think will happen after this week and the next. So let's get into some introductions. I'll start with Carneros.
Good morning. Hello, everyone.
And we will go from the top. Jin Tan, how are you doing?
Howdy, howdy. I'm doing good, thank you. It's really hot in England, but I'm just about surviving.
For this show, I'm going to have you introduce where you're from and how you're involved with this. So why don't you go ahead and tell us that?
Yeah, I'm the Alliance Executor of Red Noise, a small alliance that was poking around in Immensea before this all really kicked off. So I guess I got to watch this war kind of develop from being the tiniest little thing that I think a war has ever developed from, up until where it is now, where we have half the world deployed down into Immensea.
All right, and Killer B, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing fine. I just got back, and I am in NC Dot. How are we involved? So far, we're not really involved. We have been wormholing down for a couple of fleets from the north, and yeah, that's it.
Okay, thanks. Harvey Skywalker.
Hi, I'm Harvey Skywalker, CEO of a corporation within Pandemic Legion.
Right. That corporation is higher than Everest Peak, right?
Yeah. The
Peaky
Peaky
is-
Blinders.
That seems to be a nickname that got attached to you, which I think is very fitting. We'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. Let's finish introductions with Opner Dresden.
Hi, everybody. I'm Opner Dresden. I'm now just a line member in NC, but previously I was the executor of Explicit Alliance and helped lead DRF and DCU stuff in the last kind of major war.
So Drone Regions Federation, that group.
Yes,
Okay.
not to be confused with DRF, which is actually the only one left. That is actually the ticker of Red Menace, I think.
Right.
You're thinking of Dreamfleet.
Dreamfleet, yeah. Sorry, I was thinking of their coalition.
And we also have with us Plex Live from Goonswarm.
Hi, I'm Plex Live, FC from Goonswarm. As far as being involved in all of this conflict, I've been watching it humbly from my Cerberus fleets, shooting lots of fighters.
Oh, excellent. And also rounding out, we'll talk about Faction War later on in the show, and we've invited Silver Susperia to talk about what's going on there. How you doing, Silver?
We're good, Mineral. Thank you for having me. I'm the Exo Federation Uprising Faction Warfare Alliance, and we are watching this conflict with great interest.
Great. Okay, we'll go back and start from the beginning. Carneros and I will open up discussion on who the participants are and how they came to be. I think we'll start with Opner, since this really goes, one of the interesting parts of this is what's happening in the Galactic East, in the drone regions. So I want to find out what actually happened there, and you guys can all contribute, but let's start with Opner. Go ahead. What happened over there?
So way back a little over a year ago, Tri decided they were going to reset everybody and walk away from the DRF and all the deals they had there. They wanted to create more content and find new ways to troll and have fun, which turned out to be a pretty good decision for them. At that time, though, there was already a lot of pressure on various DRF entities. Hard Knocks in the north, Volta and Octung, am I pronouncing that correctly? Russians in a German-named alliance, which always confused me. They were wormholing in, and they had supers located throughout the middle band. And so OASA and outer region and some of those other mid-ground drone regions, and they basically farming renters for the most part. Not a ton of soft stuff. Hard Knocks and Lumpy sort of did some stuff trolling around in Cobalt Edge on the entry systems, but it was all stuff that could be handled. You had OOS that pushed in from MTO a couple of times, but nothing too super huge or major, so it was pretty boring up there. But you got a bunch of alliances together who said, hey, we're going to defend that, and that's where DCU came from, and DRF was fighting a lot
DCU
in
is
Gemini.
Drone Control Unit, right?
It was, yes. So from there, that all sort of coalesced into the English-speaking side of DRF. That created a good target for some people that wanted to get some content, mostly Unspoken and BayRJ. That at the start of the Tri reset, when the DRF decided to proactively defend their space, I guess is the best way to spin that. Mm-hmm. They deployed everybody down to Therium Reach, while the Russian-speaking side of DRF went down to try to support FCON. And we tried to have a split offensive thing going on, clean up the remnants of what Tri left over. They left Unspoken structures in a diplomatic thing to sort of try to get rid of them more easily. And then that ended up biting them because they left a big foothold for some guys to come in and really screw around with SOV and create a lot of issues and really not let any one of the smaller entities who the DRF kind of got to come backfill. They made sure they never really got a strong footing. So when things advanced to the political stage where the Diplo stuff happened with Jay and the things went bad with Guardians of the Galaxy.
And Jay is a diplomat that was representing DRF at the time, right?
Yes. And he played really fast and loose with the reputation and sort of made things really bad between Guardians of the Galaxy. That precipitated Sort dropping the Keepstar and MTO. Which created a whole new front for a DRF that was already stretched pretty thin after a long war. When all of that was happening, Jay had contracted Skill Yourself to mercenary against Tri. Somewhere in there, a payment got missed. And Skill Yourself said, okay, well, we're already in Innsmother. We're deployed with our supers, with all of this assets, and we want to go farm renters, and we're not under contract anymore. So they did, and they were really effective at it. They ended up deploying a fort that got completely missed. Nobody noticed it, and that fort, I think, still stands. I don't know if they ever got it killed, but it ended up being a huge issue because from there they could deploy their super fleet really effectively. They ended up creating huge problems in the Spire and Ethereum Reach. Volta took all their supers that had basically just been farming renters and allied up with them. Volta started as a split off from Tri when they made the original deal with XIX, and that ended up sort of reforging, I guess now you'd say, a decent relationship with guys with a lot of wormhole experience and experience in Thera, and now with a probably pretty cheaply bought super fleet off of renters fire selling. So added that to Skill Yourself, and now with Hard Knocks, who finally just took a bunch of space that was kind of empty up in Cobalt Edge. That's the Holy League. It all started from a lot of guys looking for content and basically wanting to farm renters, and it turned into, hey, we accidentally got a bunch of rental space, and they took advantage of it.
Well, and this is open to everybody. What's going on with Skill U and Hard Knocks and stuff? It seems like they're growing rapidly with Titan pilots, like they're being attracted to them. You can see that in their Titan numbers, and that's a big deal, isn't it? Because now you don't have to wait for people to build their Titans and give them to your people. It's these people come equipped. They just need to turn on their alts and.
Yeah, it was quite a new development in the meta of new kind of warfare where they had their supers, like Opna said originally, they had like groups like Volta had their supers logged out essentially, I guess in safe spots probably, or maybe in some towers, deep behind enemy lines, and they would come out of the wormholes, just like they'd sort of been doing all over Eve for a good period of time beforehand, coming out of wormholes, tackling raw calls, attacking the renters, as you say, tackling supers that were ratting and things like that. And then they started to use their own supers that they had stashed deep behind enemy lines, which was something I don't think anyone had ever used supers in that way before, which was real, like, you know, a development, an evolution of the meta, which I found really, really quite cool to observe.
Yeah, and also you got to remember that the more they use their supers, the more people who want to use supers come join them. So
Right.
they're quickly picking up steam by using those ships and getting more dudes who want to use those ships, and add injectors into that, and the fact that they already had a lot of really high skill point dudes who have been waiting for an opportunity to use them, and not just joining them, but guys already in their organizations who had a bunch of tunes that were probably, you know, sitting mothballed from previous wars.
So essentially, you have what was they're probably best known as, mostly, at least leadership, as Ex-Pizza, Confederation of Pizza. I believe they used to have a Confederate flag and some kind of meme thing like that. And they named themselves for the Alliance tournament Skill You, I believe, and that was Skill Yourself, and that was an attempt to. I think, Jen, you told me about this, right? That's an attempt to get CCP to say "kill yourself" on air.
I believe it was more of an attempt to get the player commentators to say that.
Yeah.
It's a subject that's had a lot of discussion around it. I know
It's worth
not
mentioning
particularly happy.
it's worth mentioning their ticker is INGME, right, in game.
Yeah.
So it's a play on the sort of, you know, those memes and
What, kill
guess
yourself in
jokes.
game kind of thing?
yeah, you know, that it's a play on that.
Yeah, and their image, because after the fact, they got this logo that shows somebody handing you a skill injector. So it's like, here, skill yourself up. And that's just not what the origin of the name was. I think it's lousy, but, you know, it's stuck. That's what people know them as. They're kind of at the center of this new coalition that is formed up. So Hard Knocks, we don't hear a lot about them. It's mostly about skill yourself. Why is that?
If I had to take a guess, it would be because Hard Knocks has been so ever present, and they are still just kind of doing the same stuff they've been doing for so long. And Skill Yourself is the new hotness, if you will, in the meta conversation. So everyone wants to say what they're doing. They've been pioneering some stuff. Like, that's the thing. They did sort of the same thing that Lumpy did really effectively, of multi-boxing really well, with having their subcap fleet and the same dudes flying their capitals, and being able to be super effective with T3 or the T3C changes and the super changes all at once. And they did it even better.
I'm pretty sure Hard Knocks isn't even involved in this war so far. So if I'm not, let me look at these. But I'm not sure where you got that from, that Hard Knocks was involved. It was part of the Hard Knocks just kind of started doing their whole, like, come out of the wormhole, gang some people, and they did it with supers at the start. So they kind of gave Skill You the idea, or maybe Skill You looked at Hard Knocks and how they want to run their operations, and then they just did it their own way. Like, Hard Knocks isn't involved in any of this.
Yeah, I'm not sure they are.
Whatever.
And also, they've had some high-level people take off, right? Like,
Noobman is inactive.
And the other guy that was running for CSM dropped out of the race because he went inactive.
Yeah, but, you know, Hard Knocks is fine. They're just a wormhole alliance. Skill You is not a wormhole alliance, right? Something to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So that's the thing. As you go from south to north, you see the shift from Hard Knocks being a very much wormhole alliance in a purest sense, Volta being a wormhole alliance, but more an alliance that really uses wormholes effectively. And now their identity is less attached to that, and more Thera and Sov. And then you have Skill Yourself, who's like, wormholes are a thing we take to go kill people, but that's about it.
It might be worth pointing out that there's a small conceit in what we're talking about here, where we talk about them all as if they were completely separate entities. But there is some crossover between it, where there'll be players who their main is in one alliance, but they have alts in others, and they'll sometimes play with them too. It probably isn't a big enough factor to actually matter in the overall scheme of things, like a war. But if there's a fun something happening over here and nothing happening over here, you might log in your other alt for some to jump in and enjoy it. Could be a little bit of that happening.
Well, and I think that's one of the keys, again, to recruitment and getting this super capital force kind of overnight. One is interesting gameplay that attracts players. Two is the lack of commitments to other things, like literally defending renters and doing that sort of stuff. But then they also benefited from seeing that Winter Coalition was on the rise. And who can tell us about Winter Coalition? Anybody aware of them? Well, mostly they are Chinese players from not from Serenity, but the group is called Fraternity. And there's a whole interesting backstory to their arrival into Tranquility, which is the server for EVE Online. A lot of them were fleeing for different reasons from the Chinese server, which is the only separate server of EVE Online. Everybody else in the world in real life is in Tranquility. And so as they arrive, they try to get a foothold into the game, and usually they trickle out because there's just not enough for them to do at that hour. So Fraternity was an effort to get critical mass, get enough of them to have meaningful content when they're trying to fight Australians or Russians in that late time zone for US and EU players. Yeah. And they did achieve it at one point.
Yeah, sort of simplify it and sum it up. You know, Fraternity is sort of the manifestation of the migration of Chinese players from Serenity coming to TQ for whatever reasons they want to leave their server and come to ours. You know, Fraternity is where they mostly congregate. There's also quite a large community in the Imperium as well, I believe.
Yeah.
Also,
go ahead.
I believe there's also some other places where they've gone to. It's not just been like one of two places. There are obviously, little splinter groups, because there always are.
Yeah, they've been coming and going for a long time. So it's not a big change, but it is an effort to kind of get them all in one place to be big enough to be able to fight meaningfully. And so what that means, though, because they're new to the server, is a lot of them are in sub-capitals, battleships and below. And you can see that that's very attractive to bond with if you want to use your super capitals or capital ships, because then the Chinese, can take care of the subcap for you while you come in and back them up with your bigger hardware. So for a player who's skilled into these bigger ships and wants to use them, this is a good arrangement. So that might be one of the attractors to why the Skill U is coming down to participate along with other groups like Triumvirate. What can you guys tell us about Triumvirate? They've been a really interesting player in the last year on the board.
They're a really horrible group to fight against.
What is it about that? Why are they hard to fight?
They have a lot of skill points. They are really good tactically, and they know when to pull back and they know when to press. They, like, top to bottom, there aren't a ton of groups that have all of that combined, especially at their size, and they want to be independent. They also have a deep history that gives them a lot of connections to people around EVE. So when it's politically advantageous, they can go bat phone out to just about everyone. So it works really badly in your favor unless you are really dedicated to the idea of exterminating them from an area. That was one of the things that kind of ended up sinking XIX, is they didn't purge Tri from Innsmother fully when they took it. They very slowly moved down, and they were more concerned with getting all their assets down from Geminite.
Yeah, the thing that stand out for me is sort of, significant about Tri is that, like you were saying, Opna, when they decided to sort of cut ties with the DRF, get rid of Blues, sever it was a bold and risky move, and it could have gone either way. Before, if you rolled back the clock a year and we were talking about the same thing, we'd say, they're probably making a mistake here. They're just putting themselves, out on their own in the cold, cutting ties with, a massive coalition one side of them, and, not particularly friendly with the coalition to the other side. But, looking at it now, fortune sometimes favors the bold, and they seem to have, come out the other side really strong, with a very, quite, what I would say, a very happy PvP focused alliance with lots to do. And, they took some risks, and And look where they are. They're doing all right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they walked through the crucible of content. They said, we're going to go get content. We are going to be single-mindedly about that. And at the end of the day, they achieved it. They did, like, there was a good lull period for 2 or 3 months where they looked like they had made the wrong choice, right? After the DRF abandoned Geminite and said, we're going to take Amencia, that it looked like, oh, well, Tri lost. They had lost their Keepstar. And there had been an offer on the table to, to get rid of Vin's mother and give it to DRF, and that would have been enough to satiate them, and they said, okay. But they didn't want that path, probably because they expected that FCON wasn't going to last forever, and that fraternity was going to continue to grow, and that they would have the muscle to be able to tango with the DRF long term.
I want to get off Tri just a little bit, but there is one last thing I want to explore, and that is their old ties, because I believe that the beginning of NC. Was kind of a collection between Triumvirate and Atlas. That was the very beginning of NC. In fact, I think Doom might have been in Triumvirate. So there's old ties between NC, Vince Drakens, the leader of NC, and Garce and Triumvirate, isn't there?
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure Vince was the leader of Tri, one of the iterations of Tri, if not more than one.
Maybe the first or second, very early at Tri. Because Tri is constituted and fallen apart like 7 times over.
Yeah, but I wouldn't like to sort of quantify how much they're linked to their previous iterations other than just in name. I'm not sure really.
Because people come and go.
That is. Yeah, a lot of people come and go. I mean, it's sort of different leadership and has the same name, but is it the same thing? I'm not sure really.
Yeah,
so
from my understanding with the this was all from the enemy side banter, but that Mark 6 and 7 are really similar in structure and leadership, but everything before that was a little less connected.
So when we hear things like what Votel says there, Vince told CPA, which is Captain Patrick Archer, who is the FC for Triumvirate, to do something. That kind of relationship or arrangement doesn't exist, right?
I doubt it, but it might. I mean, Archer went to NC. After some political scuffle in that 3-month period where Tri was looking kind of down, and then and he's back at Tri now. So, but yeah, I always, when I hear the reports of those kind of conversations, I can't imagine that kind of thing ever happens.
The answer is no.
Killer B. All right. Okay. Right, because that's one of the narrative strings that people are looking at that want to find a conspiracy and the cooperation and stuff like that. So I wanted to know if that was a real thing or if that's the fantasized thing. All right. So NC doesn't control Triumvirate, it's fair to say.
Yes.
God, I would hope not. They fucking cost them a fortune with bot rentals and losing stuff in the interim before they got a blue agreement in after the reset.
You mean Triumvirate cost NC a fortune?
Yeah, in the early stage of the war, a bunch of renters were flipping their shit, and oh my god, it's gonna be the end of the world. We're gonna get farmed by Tri. That was we're hearing a ton of that. So yeah, like it was if NC controlled Tri, then they played it masterfully, hiding that by costing themselves a ton of money and creating uncertainty in a rental empire, which is the last thing that anyone ever wants to do for a rental empire, right?
Yeah. Let's blow off our whole left side so we can,
So we can get a war we're not involved with in any real major way, right?
Yeah. But it's interesting. Eve has a lot of interesting subterfuge that people like to examine and stuff like that. All right. So that's Triumvirate, and Triumvirate wanted to work with, or actually Winter Coalition, Fraternity especially, wanted to work with Triumvirate to pair up, because they both saw that they could cover each other's time zones. That's a fact. And so there's a close relationship there, a close relationship of cooperation. Let's talk about legacy. We don't have Test here. We didn't have Triumvirate. We didn't have Skill U representative. That's okay. We want to move on from this. We're just kind of exploring who the players are, and then we can get to what the conflict is. But someone want to tell me about how Legacy arrived in the South and what's, what they've been doing since they got here, what their ambition is?
Okay, I'm going to do that because I think it's important we stop. Like, we cannot talk for tests or about them because we don't actually know. So this is all outsider's perspective. But the TLDR is that they moved down together with CO2, I think in 2016, when us, that being PL, NC. and Horde, pushed CO2 out of Tribute after World War B, and TEST pretty much said we cannot develop as an alliance next to PL because PL is never going to allow us to grow to a strength that we could be dangerous for them, which is why they eventually decided to, instead of just they didn't stick around for the fight. Basically, Tappy just decided to pack it up and go home or go south pretty much. And CO2 followed them. Then the whole Judge CO2 whatever thing happened, and the conflict between Tappy and CO2. Then CO2 was dead, and then it was just Tappy plus Brave plus all these other people down south, Tickle, DV, and a whole bunch of other alliances. Brave, of course, that I do not want to all mention because there's a lot of them. And that's pretty much what Legacy is.
Mm-hmm. So they're down there. I think you call them Tappy. I still call them Test, but that's the same group, just different names. And they expressed that they wanted to be a big player, and they were going to find a home, and they were going to build super capitals on it in order to defend themselves. They're going to build their own super capital umbrella. That's their goal, right?
Yeah, I mean, they have effectively done that. They have a pretty sizable super fleet, of course. For them, it is really hard to catch up to alliances like PL or or NC. or Goons. But they have done a pretty good job at building up their super cap fleet. They're one of the few alliances that are going full shield, although they've recently announced that they want to do some kind of secondary armor fleet or some shit, but we'll see if that actually happens. Apart from that, yeah, that's pretty much it. Although I have to say that Skill U pretty much has a super fleet as big as Tappy's now, and they have built that up within, I don't know, 4 months or something.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
So the question is it really that impressive, what Tappy has done, or have they been a little slow? But it's speculation again. I don't know what the reasoning for that is. Skill U also, a lot of the Hard Knocks people that had their super station 0-0 joined Skill U to use them more and stuff like that. So it's a little bit different.
That's probably like the main reason why there's that sudden growth with Skill U. There's like Test or Tappy or whatever you want to call them. They've kind of, produced their supers, whereas Skill yourself have just kind of inherited all of the, unsubbed ones that have resubbed for the content.
Well, those numbers that we're seeing are from Z Killboard, right? So that's those are ones that are in active use, and you're seeing them. I would think there's a little bit of inherent, I don't want to say bias, but there's an inherent factor where Skill U pilot gets a new super cap or Titan, they're going to use it more quickly than the test pilot who gets their first one. When it's your first Titan or super carrier, you can be a little bit nervous about using it the first time till you get the hang of it and get the big fleet opportunities. So there might be some more that are hiding.
That's also
the opportunity they've been destroying structures, clearing out renters, like they just have been fighting an active war too. So Test really hasn't. All they've had is home defense and whatever fleet Philly's been running.
Yeah, but that's so amazing to me because you have the crowdsourcing of Test has a lot of players. It's a big alliance, and now you have skill injectors. So if people generate enough money, they can buy skill injectors and skill themselves up into these big capital ships. And it's been a slow process, sort of, although it happened rapidly. But then you have an alternative place that like Skill U represents, where there's a lot of action. They're getting the right kind of content. As Harvey said, they're actually innovating some kind of warfare. And they just match Test's growth rate in 4 months. And that's amazing to me, that the difference in the way you attract players and reputation and recruitment and retention and stuff.
Well, but I think both styles are really needed for EVE, though, especially in the Sovnalpha sense, because Test is going to have a much higher rate of getting players fresh in the door who are going to train up into those ships and will be the bitter vets that retire for 6 months and then come back to a group like Skill Yourself, possibly. Like if Legacy were to collapse tomorrow, that's a scenario that we've seen play out historically before, and it'd probably happen again. Whereas Skill Yourself is not going to take in, fresh off training missions and get those guys going all the way up the chain, right? Even with skill injectors, that's just not the kind of organizations they are, or at least that's not who they've been. They might have changed culturally to allow that a lot more now, but I haven't heard anything about it. So,
yeah. All right. So then we have other players on the board, though. Again, this conflict is between Legacy and Winter Coalition. We had Billy on here, and he was pretty rough on making fun of Winter Coalition because a few episodes
I don't know,
before.
man. It's not really between Legacy and Winter Co, though. I think that's just wrong.
What do you think it is?
Well, I mean, the main parties in this conflict so far. I mean, obviously now PL has moved in with full force, but before PL moved in with full force, the conflict was between Winter, Tri, and then it started out with Winter and Legacy, right? But then Tri got involved and Skill U got involved. So you can't just say it's between Winter and Legacy. That's just it's not like Tri and Skill U and PL are third parties, right? Like those people are part of the conflict.
At this point, no, you're right. It has grown into something else, but the nucleus of it was basically Legacy and Winter Coalition. That's where it kind of the nucleus of this conflict is. Everybody else is kind of like
the catalyst. So I would agree they're the catalyst, but I think, like Killer said, we've got something new now. I think someone coined the phrase the Holy Meteorite Coalition.
I love that.
It's the mega coalition that's formed. I would say now to
it's coming to. I get it because it's coming to extinct the dinosaur, which is the symbol of Test Alliance.
Yeah. I gotta say, it's actually pretty insane, like how many people have deployed though, because it's not just. We talked a lot about Skill U and Volta and the Holy Empire, but it's not just entities like that. It is entities like Black Legion deployed, I believe. PL's brought their super fleet. Pretty much everyone's at least making some attempts to be involved in this. It was looking like it's looking like something more following along the lines of World War B than it is a conventional war right now, or at least that's my take.
In fact, in that it's a super coalition forming.
Yeah, in that it's like one direct entity with a very specific goal being formed.
Well, let me go back to the nucleus for a second, and I think you're right too, Killer B, that it's grown past this point. But initially, it started with Winter Coalition looking for an area where they could participate, have their members have some fun in their time zone, and the Russians kind of were supposed to be that. We thought there would be a Russian-Chinese fight because they kind of shared time zones. But that didn't happen. The Russians kind of imploded before the Chinese. I'm speaking in archetypal terms here, but just so people can understand. The Russians imploded, and really next to them in the area was Legacy Coalition, who had a lot of members, and you could have subcap on subcap fights. And so they might have turned and said, let's fight with Legacy. And we had the leader of the time, Wind Spirits from Fraternity on, and he said that's the kind of thing they were looking for. And then he said that Chinese players are different types of players. They don't care about the whole spies and metagame. They really care more about being like Olympic athletes, where they're just as good as they can be at doctrines and actual combat. To which Vili said, these guys are not Olympic athletes. They're terrible. We're destroying them all the time. They're making rookie mistakes. And so it's become more of a grudge match between the two instead of just a war of convenience. I think there's some actual anger there, which is kind of good, which is what drives conflict. But yes, new people have arrived to contribute. And that was what we saw. Was it LK where we saw the giant? No, it wasn't LK. But where did we see the giant fight, the move op that was destroyed when the Russians were trying to move in to help Legacy?
That'll be CTAC.
Yeah, how does that fit into this equation? Like, what was happening to set that up?
XIX or the remainders of XIX were offered, and again, this is speculation or like our narrative from the northern perspective. I don't actually know what the deal there was because Vili has I don't know if Doom, can you link me the quote, dude, with what Willie said about XIX? But anyways, Willie was very strong about them not being a part of Legacy, but they had some kind of deal that would allow XIX to live aside, like on the side with Legacy, maybe not as part of their coalition, but like next to their space, being blue and all that. So, you know, pretty much part of their coalition sort of thing. And obviously, at that point, all bets were off, right? Like a lot of something to keep in mind as well, especially NC Dot. We try to kind of keep out on the whole like XIX versus Tri conflict because there was still some connections between us and XIX, especially regarding bot space, and we didn't want to you know hurt those. But as soon as we you know knew that there was a deal between Legacy and XIX, those things were all off, right? Effectively, XIX didn't really offer us anything anymore. Either because drones have already been taken over by Skillu at that point, and so that just kind of happened. CTEC-L XIX kind of got destroyed trying to get to Legacy, and that was really the first fight where everybody just ganged up on XIX because, like I said, all bets were off.
So old alliances fell apart, and that was the culmination of that.
But was it more about hurting XIX, or was it more about ganking a super cap move up that wasn't being executed very well? Because Lord knows NC and PL have a reputation for loving to blow up super caps when they can catch them unprotected. Yeah,
so obviously it's both, right? Like on the one hand, we kill them, it's fun. On the other hand, it also effectively we cut off some, you know, that kind of thing. Like at the end of the day, CTEC-L had potential to be really, really big, but once more, Tappy decided not to assist their ally and let them die on the field, which we've seen plenty of times before. You know, it was just one of those. It was just one of those things again, and XIX only lost like 25 super carriers, which is not that many, but it was a huge blow to their morale for one, and also all those supers were packed with all the ships. They set that up, right? Like they had all their ships packed in there for their move up. So that's obviously like some people lost a super with all the stuff that they own in it.
Which is a devastating blow to a player.
Yeah, exactly. Which can make a player quit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that wasn't part of the calculus, though, was it? You guys didn't think like, hey, we better not kill these guys.
We didn't think anything. Like, there was Tri who set it up, right? For us, it was just we basically Tri and Winter got the initial tackle on the XIX move up, and then they scrambled they poked us, they poked PL, and we just all kind of jumped in there and assisted them, killed XIX.
On the other hand, if you looked at how that move up was going and how the level of preparation they put into it and the level of structures they had set up in space ahead of time to help them with the move up, if you had been in test position, if PL had been in test position, you're NC Dot. But if your PL had been in test position and been asked at the last minute to run in and try to save this move up that was going poorly and protect them, I think PL would have looked at the situation and said, "Oh dear God, I'm not sure if this is salvageable."
No, that's how good allies work. There has been plenty of situations. I think the most prominent example is BTEC-R, where we jump in on each other's side without any questions asked. Right, it's there is no for NC and PL, which is why this relation. Sometimes we have a little, you know, sometimes we tease each other a little. Sometimes there's a little tension between NC and PL because some egos rub at each other. That just happens, right? That's how it goes with alliances like this. But when I got dread bombed with my Titan and Nelvula, I started I was still at PL at that point. That's something to keep in mind. Headliner started pinging PL, and I pinged NC Dot. The NC Dot members had zero information on what was going on. I just pinged them, log in everything, and jumped to my Sino, and everybody did it. There was no questions asked. It's like, okay, PL Killer Beeb is from PL. He's pinging NC Dot. Some shit is going down. We're jumping in there. Nobody asked any questions. There was no like, hey, wait, but what's actually going on? And GUTG did the same, by the way. GUTG has been getting a lot of shit, but when I got dread bombed in Nervula, I just spammed our Discord and told them, hey, get in here. I didn't give any information because I was busy, and they all just jumped in. And that's how good allies work. And
but it is a little bit different, though, Killer Bee, to be fair, because you have the protection of the super umbrella of the North they know they're not jumping into something that could devastate them. But I think Test didn't know if they were going to jump into something that could devastate them.
So the other thing is, like, there's a history there. There's a deep background of Killer in particular, and PL and NC Dot and Guardians all operating jointly in a healthy way that produces victories. The Test XIX relationship is less firm on a lot of those fronts. The communication is not nearly as fluid and dynamic. The getting responses from Russians is often hit or miss, just in general. XIX in particular. During a lot of the war, a lot of ops that got scrubbed just because miscommunication and not requesting aid, like, in a good way. So, yeah, honestly, like, it would not surprise me if Villy or ProGod or any of the other leadership in Test said they did what? No, we can't do anything about it, and they're gonna
I think though there was some talk about there was a little more cooperation than that. It wasn't a complete shock. Like it was.
Test was formed up. Test was formed up with Ejector Fleet to protect their move up. It wasn't. They knew that XIX was going to do that move up. They had Ejector Fleet to protect them, and then when everything went south, they decided it is not worth risking our assets here because it could go bad. And I understand it from Tappy's standpoint. I can understand that because they're right now in that very vulnerable spot where their super fleet is on the growth. But if they get all their supers nuked right now, or even a part of that fleet, they're in a really, really bad position. So Villy and ProGod really only ever use supers if they can use them 100% on their terms. And that was just not a fight in CTEC-L that happened on their terms. They weren't really set up for that kind of escalation, and they didn't want to risk jumping the assets in. So I completely understand the strategic choice. I just think it makes for a poor ally. Which is why
you're projecting. I think you're projecting, sir. I think that's not. I don't think you have the data to support how they choose to use their super cap. I think they've had some opportunities recently where it could be used in the way they wanted to. They've had a few opportunities where it couldn't, but I think you can really say.
But in this group, he's the closest thing we have to an experienced coalition level FC that commands the kinds of assets that we're talking about.
Sure, so, it doesn't mean he's always going to be right.
Right.
No, but he's the most experienced.
I think the reason
I'm just a line member.
Yeah, I think the reason we're not sort of sinking here is that the two situations don't really compare very, like 100%. You know, Killer's just talking about, you know, what makes a good ally and the, you know, the value that he sees in the relationship between NC and PL. Clearly, you know, like Opna said, that isn't the same. There isn't the same value of relationship between Test and X-Death, and I think we can all agree that those two things don't really compare, do they? So, you know, it's not so much. I don't think we're disagreement on this as it feels.
It seems right. No.
Yeah,
I totally agree. I do want to say there's something about allies though that I wanted to explore, and that was when XIX or DRF, because XIF is in DRF, Drone Region Federation, when they were in trouble, NCPL did not go and save them, and they had been allies in the past. Is there anything you can tell us, Kilby, on why you guys didn't go and stop the threat before it collapsed DRF?
I don't think we were that invested into that relationship, to be honest. So for me personally, I wasn't really interested in going to help them out because I didn't have a very high opinion of XIX and the DCU myself. I was personally, I personally liked SkillU a lot more, but that was just my personal opinion. But I basically said, okay, that's fine. Like I told SkillU, I'm not going to get involved in any fleets over there. It could very well happen that we deploy and purge your structures, although that would not help much versus SkillU. But I told them, like, I'm not going to run that. I just don't really do that myself. I don't know. No, I can't really.
So you kind of gave them assurances then that you weren't going to mobilize
for myself. Yeah, I told SkillU if there is an executive decision made by Vince that etc. will deploy and purge your structures. I guess if Vince makes an executive decision, I would obviously follow that. But I wasn't going to do anything until that point. Let's put it that way. And that executive decision never happened, so I just stayed out of it.
Right.
That is also because I have ties to Skill Yourself leadership. Like I know Capku for a long, long time, and I like him.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other part of that was, so instead of going and deploying and helping DRF, I decided to, because Skill U and Hard Knocks, I believe, were attacking bot renters, which belonged to PLNC. Instead, I believe they opted to buy them off or something like that. There was some kind of payment made.
Say again?
I think they decided to make arrangements diplomatically.
Ooh.
NCPL with Skill U.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's interesting then, because it adds to what seems to be the sides that are forming up now with NC and PL. And let's talk about that before we get to Goonswarm's entry. What is NCPL doing in this situation now that it's forming up?
Harvey, you want to start for PL?
Yeah.
Well, for PL, I'm not in any position to make decisions in PL about where and what we do or anything. But after we have finished in Provi, obviously we had been pushed out of Provi and somewhat humiliated by Legacy Coalition. So there was a factor of for me personally, I wanted a bit of revenge. So when I heard what we were doing, I was pretty happy. Nice bit of revenge. This is, and there's not many options for conflicts. And when a conflict flares up, and one half of that conflict is, the people who are your enemies from Provi, it's a pretty easy decision what we should do. If it's not very complicated.
You're all about it, right?
Yeah, I'm all about that, right? It's not very complicated. It's like there's a fight about to start. One side's got my enemies in it. The other side has got people that we've worked with in the past, and there's, as Canaris would point out, we're all pretty chummy on that side of the fence. So it's all fairly straightforward.
But you do a lot of work for PL. I mean, you do a lot of the work in there, taking on the SOV responsibility, destroying stuff, getting it ready to be destroyed by the bigger fleets and stuff like that. So, because you and the Peaky Boys, right? Now, let's explore that nickname a little bit. Tell us why you're called the Peaky Boys.
Well, the corp ticker is Peak. I made the corp years ago. Anyway, the corp ticker is Peak, and I'd been, when we were
Were you a mountain climber or something? Because it's higher than Everest, and the
higher than Everest. Yeah, just a play on, I guess 420 Blaze It kind of thing. This is a bit silly. I made this corp name ages ago, and then Peak was the ticker I settled on. I can't really remember the thought process, but yeah, it was just a play on words, various overlapping meanings. Anyway, but then when we were out in Immensea at the end of TC's life, I was watching the Peaky Blinders series on, and it's a great series, by the way. I recommend it to everybody. But and we just started calling ourselves the Peaky Blinders anyway. And then when we joined PL, lots of people would start to come and small gang with us and stuff from other corporations. And it seemed silly to just be like, I know we sort of took our corp name into that group, but it's just a group of people that like to small gang PvP, but not just small gang around the place looking for ganks and hunting rorquals or something like that. We specifically small gang using the SOV mechanics to get our content and to get our kills. That's all it is, and everybody in PL is welcome to it, and lots of people come and join in, but it's fairly small scale. And in this conflict, at the moment anyway, the SOV warfare is not the real bone of contention, I would say. There's lots of faction citadels and other sort of bigger ops that are going to be the more important thing. Yeah.
Well, I love a couple of things there. Peaky Blinders, or if you haven't seen it, old school gangsters from England, and they have a lot of style, right? Is that, yeah, Peaky is the style, meaning you're very dressed up and very stylish, and the Blinders.
Yeah, or is it something to do with their hats? I don't know, but Yeah,
well, I thought the hats were the blinders. Anyway, really funny comparison, because you guys are kind of
Gangsters.
gangsters with some style. Yeah, I do. I see it that way. You and Ragnar, and you guys have a lot of humor, and but you guys are so effective.
Well,
to a certain degree.
some people might argue we're not that effective.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Well-
maybe after Provi, I don't know, Jin. What do you think?
I think I've sung you guys' praises well enough. I've talked about it before. I think this kind of gameplay is actually really fun. It's what I've been doing a bunch with Red Noise, my new alliance. Just a bunch of small gang stuff, fucking about in smaller ships and having a blast.
But small gang with a purpose. You guys are attacking structures. You're bringing them out to defend their stuff. It's not just roaming around and ganking or sitting at a gate camp. I guess it's kind of an old thing to do, which I think is interesting because you guys have kind of embraced the soft mechanics as they are, the structure mechanics as they are, and
They serve
work.
that kind of gameplay quite well. I've said this before on here that perhaps they don't serve. The Fuzzy Sov, Aegis Sov doesn't serve the larger coalition scale conflicts quite as well as it serves 10 or 15 guys going out to, draw a fight out of some other dudes, some other equally sized guys.
That's really interesting because speaking from our perspective, that's why we liked Sov Warfare. It suits the way we fight quite well, and part of the reason why we're still hanging out in Cloud Ring.
Well, let me sneak in a question here while we're still talking about this theater, though. And that is, we've seen now Black Legion move in the past week. I mean, we've seen the PL Supercap fleet moving into position. What are you guys hoping happens next, specifically with regard to the Imperium? What are you guys hoping the Imperium will do?
So Goons already announced that their members should get ready for the split super deployment or whatever you call it, I think, where you basically leave shield at home for defending the crabs and you deploy ammo or something like that, and you really have two options, right? The Imperium has two options. They can either go support test, which would mean they would deploy their stuff to the Tappy front, and they would help out with that, or which is the option that I'm pretty excited for. They come and push on the north now that the PL Superfleet has moved out. Maybe your Sky Marshals or whatever you call them see an opening to start a harder push on the north because we've lost one very big part of our northern Superfleet kind of thing. I think those are the two options that the Imperium can go right now. I hope it's option 2. Personally, but I can see option 1 happening too. So I'm very excited for that. And it's obviously like the fact that PL moved their super south is a huge deal, right? Because even so, if the Imperium decide option 2, which would be going after the north, I don't think how Tappy will be able to hold off the invasion that they're facing right now, because the PL Superfleet and Skill U and Tri, they're heavily outnumbered. They're heavily outnumbered in caps and super caps, which was something that previously wasn't necessarily the case. They have been outnumbered before, but it was kind of evenish. Now they're 100% outnumbered, and it would be very interesting to see if the Imperium can make up for the loss of Test by starting a push on the north.
It's kind of an interesting kind of progression of what's going on anyway, because Test were really, or currently are really struggling to do anything offensively due to time zone tanking mechanics. It all comes out in Winter Coalition's prime time, which is very much not the prime time for Test. And Winter Coalition are just completely outforming them on any defensive side timers on Winter's perspective. So Test are actually struggling to push any FOBs out of their space or near their space.
Forward operating bases.
And on the flip side, all of the legacy alliances, like a week ago, changed their vulnerabilities out of the Euro time and into the US time, which is perfectly feasible. I wouldn't call it time zone tanking as such as they're putting it into their own strong time zone, which is US time zone is legacy's strongest time zone. I think we can all agree that. And for me personally, a lot of the SOV that I could have pushed against is now out of bounds to me, because of the time zone it's in. And in the same way, the fraternity SOV is being put into their time zone, which, all right, it's the AU time zone, which we traditionally scorn people that change their timers to AU time zone and call it, time zone tanking and, trying to avoid a fight. But for fraternity, that's not really trying to avoid a fight. That's putting things into a time zone when they have their most people. So, everybody's doing the same thing. They're putting their stuff to a time zone when they're most strong, which is a good thing. I think that, people aren't trying to put it just to the most awkward time zone, but are trying to put it to their strongest time zone, which is, so it's not such a negative on everybody, I think.
Yeah, I wasn't using the term time zone tank in a negative way. It's just the nature of the alliances and how they exist.
Yeah. I know. I just like how people might. I was just trying to help people. Sort of, other people might have thought you were or whatever. I'm just. Yeah.
So, Harvey, PL has moved supers down. Have they moved all of them? They moved down 100 Titans, 200 Force auxiliaries, which are Titan repair ships. This is a big force, plus 150 super carriers. I don't know. I guess you can't ask, is that everything? But it sure seems like it's a considerable move. It's not half.
There's another 200 Titans sitting on a Titan, actually, ready to go. So,
do we have Titans and supers all over the place, Matterall? In the hundreds. Yeah. There's super caches, Titan caches all over EVE.
I didn't know that. I always thought super capitals were together, but Dread caches and Force auxiliary caches.
That's why you sometimes see the Imperium concerned about where NCPL might be placing a new Keep Star in Lowsec.
Well, okay. Interesting reference there.
They're not all like wonderful locations where everyone's invited to come and trade with each other and smile and socialize and have a glass of champagne. No,
but that's not why you're concerned about the Keep Star with my name on it in Onan. That's a different consideration.
I'm just teasing you about that one.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's what I thought. All right, then there's a couple questions left. What is NC going to do? I don't know if we can ask that, Killer B, unless you want to tell us what's NC doing. Are they staying up north with GOTG? If GOTG is staying up north, or is everybody coming down with the big hardware?
Like I said, it depends a little bit on Goon's options, of course. But so far, we've been watching the conflict in the south evolve. We have sent considerable fleets down for the LK1K timer, the fraternity staging for it. We were provided with a full Macarial fleet made in China that we basically just had to move down Intis for, and then we hopped into the ships and we were there with a full Macarial fleet on grid. We did have some impact. And for other timers, we've been wormholing down. So we'll sit, we'll see what happens and how things evolve, and also depends, of course, what the Imperium does. Like I said, that's a big factor for us always.
Sorry, a little aside here on the topic on that Macarial fleet. I hear through the grapevine that the fittings that you got for those Macarials were kind of random. I guess you had half
half
micro drive fit and half MD and half AB fit.
It was so funny because I gave Noraus, or how do you even say his name? Noraus? I don't know. Who's kind of in charge of Winter Coalition, or not kind of, he is in charge of Winter Coalition. I basically gave him the fitting I wanted on the Macarials 4 or 5 days in advance, and then he contracted me to 300 Macarials or whatever he got me. I think it was 230 Macarials. He contracted him to me, and I looked through the fittings as I handed them out to the members, and it was wait, these are half. What am I going to do with this? I can run half an MWD Macarial, half an AB Macarial fleet. And then we scrambled some mods together. We were able to buy most of the stuff on the LK1K market, fortunately. So we did just refit all of the Macs to the fitting I wanted them to have.
Who owned the LK1K market?
It's FRT.
Oh, okay, so they had their own stuff there. All right.
Yeah. It was all just a ploy to get you to spend market taxes, Killer B. How do you feel?
They just give you a little taste.
Money.
So okay, so what is if NC is actions may depend on what Imperium does? Plex, what do you think Imperium's going to do?
It's a hard call to make because like moving supers in the current meta is a big choice, right? Because you're always risking potential counter to your own space, especially with how soft mechanics work. You can burn space pretty quickly if you're not able to defend it with a very small force. So it's kind of hard to tell. Like I do, it didn't even cross my mind actually because I haven't put that much thought into it. Seems it happened quite recently that we could go north and go hard, but that's taking a super fleet pretty far away. Going towards the fight, to our east is a viable option. It's just whether we're not the main instigators of this war, and this is my own opinion, but going and throwing supers down in a fight when the main defenders haven't actually committed anything yet seems like a bit of a risky move.
Yeah. And from your perspective, the Imperium was attacked by all these parties in the past.
Yeah, of course. There's that history that everybody in EVE at one point has attempted to purge us out of the space that we used to live in. So there's always going to be those floating memories of and flashbacks to whatever you want to call the war. So there can be some old scars and wounds that will lay around from that kind of stuff.
And when you ask a question like that, it could be answered from the perspective of me personally, or my corporation, or my alliance, or my coalition. I personally have lost 2 Titans in this game, one to NC Dot, and one to a lovely PL bait hot drop situation. I should not have taken that bait. Yeah. So
NC and PL each took one of your Titans.
Yeah.
You're a wealthy man.
Which is fun. It's fun. It's weird because I did not expect losing a Titan to ever be fun. And it's remarkably a different feeling than you would have thought. Especially the first one, it's not truly gone from me. I still remember that shit.
Right. It's in there. It's in your
not all
memory.
Now.
So for you, NCPL are much higher on your enemies list than, say, Test would be, even though Test attacked you guys in the Casino War.
No, because I'm the leader of the Bastion, and the Bastion is a merger of 2 previous nullsec SOV entities, LI3 Federation and Gentleman's Agreement. And when I was CEO of LI3 Federation, we were a member of the Honey Badger Coalition. So we worked with Test, and we worked with a little bit with PL. PL was sort of, I don't know, the grandfather of the Honey Badger Coalition, so to speak. They weren't active on everything, but they were around and advising the boss. That's what it felt like to me. So I don't have negative feelings about those years in Honey Badger, and I don't have negative feelings about Test at all.
Okay. So beyond the narratives, which is what we try to get to, it's a bit of everything, isn't it? It's a bit of convenience. It's a bit of a good situation to get good combat content in. And there's also an element of grudges and paybacks and stuff like that. This conflict kind of has it all, doesn't it?
My main hope for this kind of thing is like the last few major potential conflicts that have started to bubble up have all been, thwarted for many other reasons, right? Either too many people pile in on one side and one side collapses, or someone from the inside burns the alliance down, etc., etc. My main hope is I'm just excited to see a potential big war kick off, and lots of good fights happening. Yeah, especially in the summer. That never happens. Things usually get super boring in the summer, and it's just killing crabs. But I really want to see something really develop from this. Whether it is we go north and that goes huge, or we go east and that goes huge, whatever. Like I would like to see something like that personally, because it's going to be all TZ content. Every single time zone will benefit from that kind of stuff, because you've got all of the alliances that are US TZ based that will be hitting each other. All the EU groups will be hitting each other, and the FRAT obviously are AUTZ. So there's going to be a lot of AUTZ content happening, which is great for me. Seems that's the time zone I recently changed to.
You're in AUTZ time zone, Australian time zone?
Yeah.
Thank you for staying up late for the show.
Yeah. Like 2 a.m., 3 a.m.
My fear is that we'll go one direction and then all the action will happen on the other front. Because I'm hoping the Imperium gets pulled into. I mean, I don't drive anything. The Mittani will make those decisions, and the Bastion will go with them as a close partner. But whatever he picks, I'm hoping that's where the action is. And we have recently sort of split our Super Cap fleet into 2 fleets, an armor and a shield, and they'll never ever tell us in advance which one's going to do what, because then there would be a bias to preparation, and we need both of them to be strong.
All right.
One crosses one's fingers.
There's one thing I left out that I didn't talk about earlier on. I want to circle back to Winter Coalition, again, mostly Fraternity being Chinese players. And their play style is different than most Western play styles. And that is that they do not subscribe to Hell Dunk or Blue Balls. And Hell Dunk means like you bring everything and you totally destroy your enemy. And Blue Balls is you don't show up, because that frustrates your enemies when they show up big and you don't show up at all. So they formed up for nothing. So that is a strategy of like heat and cold and heat and cold and heat and cold that works on the fabric of your alliance and breaks it, because they basically don't get any fun. And that's how a lot of big wars are fought. But Fraternity doesn't really do that. They kind of form and fight regardless of anything. And that is one of the attracting things about supporting them. They'll never call for help and say, we're going to stand down because, they formed up bigger than us. So I don't know if that's a big deal, but it's interesting. The philosophy of game style and strat ops and psychological ops is a little bit different with a different party like Fraternity. And I'm sorry we couldn't get into this, but Fraternity has a mortal enemy as well. Other Chinese players in PL from, I believe the corporation's PLA. So there's some grudge match of their own going on. What is it?
PLA is in Goonswarm. Goonswarm has multiple Chinese corporations. PLA is, I think, the biggest. The Bastion has a Chinese corp also.
Yeah, PLA and FRAT have long-term disagreements back from Serenity days. So they've always kind of been butting each other's heads, and I'm not exactly sure what happened on that server, but the grudge has lasted a long time.
Right. So what's interesting is that even if Imperium says, yeah, we're not going to participate, or we're going to sit out, or we're going to attack the North, you have this corporation and sizable group of Chinese players inside of the Imperium itself that's like, hell no, we want to fight Fraternity. We're going. Could be interesting. Kilby, were you going to say something?
Brave just lost 4 supers to PL, by the way.
PL already thrown around the super fleet they brought down.
Wasted no time. What happened there?
Not sure yet. Let me see if I can get some details.
It looks like a rank fleet that was trying to be saved.
Yeah. It looks like it was a pretty straightforward gank, though, to me. 4 hells have died total, and a couple of dreads.
Yeah, it looks like Nightmare Fleet tackled it from Volta, probably just called PL to quickly zonk them. Looks like Brave dropped like other supers and a dread and no faxes to kind of support it, and they all
so they got dropped on a Fortizar. Skill you tackled 4 hells on the 3L3 and Fortizar, and then PL came in with the DPS to finish them off. That's
On 4. Oh, God.
Yeah, I think they warped from. They must have warped from the Havens to the fort when somebody entered local assumption. I'm getting more details right now, so hopefully I'll be able to present the full picture.
Yeah, keep us posted as we finish up the show. Last part of this is, now we've talked about all the players, what motivates them, what gets them interested in this war. Some of it's psychological, some of it's just opportunistic. What do you guys think is going to evolve here? What do you think the situation will look like in about 3 weeks?
It's really impossible to say, because it really comes down to the decisions of very few people. At the end of the day, it comes down to what does the Imperium, what way do they go when they decide what they do, right? Like there's like a butterfly thing, right? Butterfly effect. There's like so many options they have. They could either decide to get involved, not involved. If they get involved, do they go north or do they help Tess? Like, and depending on each of those like decisions, we will obviously adapt our course of action. And that's why it's very hard to predict. But one way or another, I think it'll be a very, I really hope, and I think that's something we can all agree on, even all the haters in Twitch chat, is that it would be great if we would get some content out of all of this. Because there's been a whole lot of Reddit posting about it, a whole lot of, people building up their sites, propaganda. But so far, not too much has happened. I think now with PL deploying their supers down, this is the first big step in the right direction to get us some EVE wide or at least 0-0 wide content out of this, which would be amazing.
So what's the objective here, though, overall for NCPL? Is it, when's the war end? What happens? What are the conditions for end of war?
Oh, I can really talk on PL's behalf, but I know that, like Harvey said, PL's pretty pissed at Test. I think they want to kick their shit in. So I would say that's the objective.
Destruction.
Point of view.
I mean, at the end of the day, the grand objective is, for any alliance leader, PL or anyone, is to keep their members engaged and active. And for PL, I think you could all guess what keeps them engaged and active, and that's conflict. So, the means is almost, for me personally, especially, and my boys, I know, my corp, the means is the objective at the end of the day. The same with Provi, really, back when we were taking all those stations. The actual process of doing it was what we wanted to do. It wasn't to get, for us, even if Legacy hadn't come into Provi and taken all the stations back, just going in there and doing it, we would have never, as members of my corps or even CEO of my corp within the alliance, would have never got any of those faction fort sites. It just goes to the Legion, and in this case, it didn't go to the Legion, but it's the process, right? It's a game at the end of the day. We just want to play the game, and I hope that we've taken a little bit of inspiration from Triumvirate, that taking a risk and living a little bit more dangerously can pay dividends, and the members get to benefit from those dividends being activity, risk, conflict, old school grudges a little bit, that sort of thing. That's as far as I can draw conclusions of what our objectives would be. I don't think anyone's going to hang their hat on saying, the holy meteorite is going to make the dinos extinct, because it's Eve at the end of the day, and no one fully goes extinct unless they want to. FCON may have gone extinct, but that was just, if they'd had good leadership and a nice binding ethos, they wouldn't have died out. They would have just been evicted and moved on somewhere else. World War B, it was World War B, against the fat B and the goons, and they're still alive and stronger than ever. And I wouldn't have it any other way. No one wants the other team to quit the game or anything. We just want conflict, and we want, shake things up a little bit. Tri have been excellent at shaking things up over the last year. And, why can't we all have a little crack at shaking the tree?
Yeah, Tri's MVP.
I for one, really interested in the fact that PL have moved all of their stuff down, because there's been a long kind of perpetual whisper of PL are dying, PL aren't doing anything, and this is probably the first time in a long time PL have actually engaged in a really big conflict, or could potentially be engaging in a really big conflict, because
since
all the
World
stuff,
War B.
Yeah, because all the stuff in Provi was
the last
pretty
really big conflict
for PL, right? and nobody has really seen them do anything of massive note since then. So like it would be nice, I'm quite interested to see what will actually happen. And yeah, I think all of us are on the same page here. Like we just want this conflict to kick off and turn into something, something for what we love EVE for, which is these crazy, long-term battles that involve thousands and thousands of people across weeks and months and just crazy shit happening.
Sounds fun to me.
Harvey, you've actually been somebody who's influenced the history of the game because you were leader of the culture, and at a certain point you wanted to move your guys out. So you sold the assets in Fountain to the Imperium, which allowed them to more easily move up through Fountain into the Pureblind area, which caused basically 9TAC4, the biggest battle in any video game ever.
I think giving me a little bit too much credit there, but I mean, like Killer said, there's the butterfly effect. One small choice. I talked to you before on the show about the history of TC and that choice. We had sat fairly secure for a period of time, long enough that, for a PvP alliance, which is what we called ourselves, whether anybody else called us that or not, that's what we called ourselves. And that was our objective, was to have conflict. And, I came back from a little summer holiday, and Tri had actually, Tri is the another flap of the butterfly wing that changed TC's course of action, because Tri going to war, getting rid of their blues, shattering the donut they were a part of, influenced, a corporation within the culture, and they decided they were going to leave the culture and go south and join Tri because that looked really interesting and they wanted that conflict. And I, in Fountain, I couldn't provide them with the conflict that they wanted, because we were just we were secure, and so they wanted insecurity, they wanted conflict, they moved to Tri. And so then when I thought, well, I can sit here and carry on with TC, but more and more of my good people are gonna go away and look for, the people that I wanted around are people that would go for that kind of conflict, go for those risks and stuff. And I would lose more of those people and be left with just people that wanted to Rorqual mine and people that wanted to rat. So
they'd go to skill you, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I decided, sod it. We're leaving Fountain. We're gonna just burn it all to the ground and go south and do something else, And in my mind, I had two scenarios that choice would create. One, we would go south and it would reinvigorate everybody in the culture, and we would, get involved in some kind of conflict, whatever it was. And the other was that, people who had been hanging around for the fact that they, had the secure space, and, we had a lot of moons, a lot of moon income in the culture. And, perhaps that was something that was making people not leave when they would otherwise have made a different choice. And as soon as those moons were gone, Fountain was gone, then you see who the real loyal people are. Not so much loyal, but the people whose interests align best with you, right? And not many of them did. Some of the corps, I say not many, they're all great corps, and some of them, went to NC Dot because and they saw that was where their interests allied, and some of them just had gone a bit inactive and kind of died out a little bit, and they all fragmented. And my second scenario was that I wanted to take my corporation that TC had been really good for, because my error with TC was putting so much focus into my own corp and looking after my own corp, and then relying on the other CEOs to do the same for their corps. And I wanted to basically join what I saw as the biggest, baddest PvP alliance in the game, and that was Pandemic Legion. So we went with that because actually, like I said, TC kind of fragmented when it didn't have the things that had bound it together for so long, which was Fountain and the moons.
God bless.
Yeah. So let's wrap up this segment. Is there anything else you guys want to comment on this coming war? I'm sure we'll be covering it even more so than we already have. The last 3 episodes have been pretty much looking at this, but it is what looks like as big an invasion as the Casino War, World War B that happened 2 years ago.
I mean, is it? Like, that's I hope this happens the way that everyone wants it to, and it feels like everyone seems to be on the same train. But remember, World War B started on a very different trajectory, where it kind of snuck up on everybody. Nobody really saw it coming, because when Horde started really punching tissue in the or not tissue, freaking space monkeys in the face, everyone was like, "Oh, well, the Imperium is vulnerable." Yeah, let's get in on that.
I have to say, Talking in Stations saw it coming. Dirk and I and other people sat around a map. We were watching troop movements. We were saying something's happening here. I had made contact with I Want ISK and did this big article on I Want ISK and their motivations and how the war started, all the way down to the absolute beginning of that argument, which I think was the tree trunk of the branches that later became the full invasion.
Right, but
that's how we made our name. But other than that, I don't know if anybody else had the whole picture as it was happening.
I remember at the collapse of BL, before I made TC, I had said to the leadership of BL at the time, I had said, look, that this was, Aegis had just hit. I said, look, there is going to be a big conflict, and where we are right now, J5A, which is where BL was, which was the culture's capital home system for our entire existence, was the same place where the BL ended its time in 00. And I said to them, there's going to be a creeping war. Those are my words, and I've got it written down in a Google document somewhere. I posted on Reddit actually a couple of years ago just to smug, but yeah, I called it a creeping war, and it's going to start, and where we are now will be a perfect position to be involved in it. And they were like, nah, we want to go to low sec. It looked like low sec was where conflict was kicking off, and they weren't wrong, because the beginning of World War B did start in low sec with the low sec Voltron fighting against the Imperium push against their moons, right? So they weren't wrong, but I think a lot of people had seen it coming on the horizon, if they just sort of could see, could look through the fog of war or whatever.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. If the Imperium had held the line against Horde in the initial stage better, it might have dissuaded enough force that they could have held on. And I think that's that butterfly effect, where you don't even realize the mistakes that you're making in the long-term strategy that encourage more hyenas to come in and start bringing you down. And that's where I think we're at that stage right now, where if Test does everything right, and maybe if they kill off 10 PL super caps and all of a sudden momentum swings a little bit back the other direction and their dudes get a little fired up, like maybe they blunt that initial force and some people rethink some deployments. I don't know. We might have already passed that Rubicon, but we'll see. I do hope that we get there, but I don't think we're quite solidified into World War B 2.0 yet.
No, but clouds are forming. There's no storm yet, as Killer Bee pointed out. Right. All right. Last thing, in the new tradition of naming things before they happen, what's your name for the war, Harvey?
I want to call it the Trinosaur War, because Triumvirate and Test are definitely, I guess Winter Coalition as well are the catalysts for the war that's going on now. I know there's a lot of other parties involved, but those groups, Test, the Test middle management Dino, Triumvirate, Winterco, they're the catalysts in my mind. And the Trinosaur War is I think a lot better than the Eve War, as in everyone versus everyone. I think we can do better than that.
Yeah, it always takes some time to name a war. We'll find a way.
Yeah, I'm sure the fact that I'm trying to force it will guarantee that it doesn't stick.
It won't. Yeah, I tried to force a name too. Didn't work. But I like your imagination. See, look at that. You already got the McLeod says fucking love the Trinosaur War. Okay. Jintan, one last thing. Jintan, you have left CVA a while ago. You've successfully rejoined CSM through being voted in. You've started your own group called Red Noise, which I guess is a take on White Noise, which is a Russian group, right?
I don't know where they were from. It's a cool name, and it's a nice little reference to Eve history.
But it seems to have
one
Russian
of the guys who were
written all over it. Somebody else came up with it. Okay.
Yeah, no, it was one of the initial people who came up with one of Noor Sami's friends. It's really great. I love the logo we've got. It's something very unique. It's a butterfly. You don't see a lot of those in EVE.
So what are you doing? Because you're in the area, right? Like, what's going on? Is this happening all around you?
We originally were down in Immensity. We've basically, since I put Red Noise together, one of the first things I wanted to do was spend some time kind of learning offensive software. Obviously, that's not something I had a huge amount of time to learn in Providence. We're very defensive. We've always been very defensive over that. And since joining Test, there hasn't been much opportunity for that. So I put together my own little alliance, mixture of some people from Provi and some people from a couple other different areas of space, like the remnants of the DCU, and just going and poking at people that I can find, basically. Just trying to make some fun and see how everything fits together and see if people will enjoy me, basically.
Are you falling on one side or the other of this conflict?
Yeah, I guess we're falling on the legacy kind of the conflict, the side of the conflict in our own little way. It's not like we're you're not going to be seeing us in 200-man, super fleets anytime soon. What we're doing is a lot more of kind of, I suppose, what Harvey's doing. A lot of small gang, 10 to 20 to 30 people, just trying to have an impact and forge our own story in the game. It's been great fun.
Well, you benefited from the votes for CSM from Test, since you were second on their ballot and their first person got knocked off due to CCP's saying he couldn't finish his candidacy. And you were in Test for a little while, but you left before the voting happened. So I guess there are some strings there.
I talked to Dran about it beforehand.
I like to think that Jin would have got in on the back of his previous performance on the CSM.
Very nice to say and very true. Okay. I thought I had one last thing to say, but I think we're pretty much done with that topic. Oh, if you like Harvey, this is what I wanted to plug. If you like what Harvey, like as much as I do, he wrote a great article on the Providence conflict between PL and Test. And you can find that on talkinginstations.com. I've left it up as the top story and will for a while. It's a great long article full of details. Okay, we want to shift gears real quick to Faction War. We've invited Silver Suspiria to hang out with us and tell us about what's going on in Gallente versus Caldari Faction War. You want to give us a quick update?
Yeah, sure. It's been pretty hot lately. Basically, the landscape is, Citadel sort of changed the game in faction warfare quite a bit, right? It comes down to the traditional war zone push or system captures that you do by capturing plexes. It's become somewhat irrelevant, at least in PvP, because there's not really any strategic value there. You used to be able to lock your enemy out of NPC stations, and that was the big driver. But now with Citadels, you can live in any system and spam them around, and the system captures are a little bit outdated. And they switch back and forth from farmers anyway, right? It's a popular place for people to farm LP and to get ISK, and the nature of the mechanic makes one LP valuable for a little while, and then it declines, and then you switch to the other side, and it kind of ebb and flows like that. And then you got the other hand where Galamil functions quite a bit like a coalition, and we're quite strong at the moment. Most of us took some time in Nullsec to go get ourselves some faction Vortizars, and that led some to really good experiences. A lot of our pilots have elevated their PvP level because we were fighting people all the time. Black Legion stopped by, Tissue did a Hell campaign, a couple other coalitions came by and gave us some good content there. So coming back to Lowsec, looking at, well, what can we do in faction warfare? Pushing plexing and traditional war was not going to really cut it for most of our guys. Plus, we're a little bit big for that now. Fed Up alone is pretty big, but Galamil as a whole, we could put together a 100-man fleet, 120-man fleet, and that's a bit big for plexing. So we decided we wanted to up the ante a little bit, and the one thing Citadels did offer us is a way to more directly attack our enemies in the Caldari, right? They have structures. They have reaction farms. They have shipbuilding facilities. They have staging, Fortizars, Athenars, these things. So Galmil decided we're going to do this a little bit differently. We're going to flip the war zone again and back into Galente control. It had been tier 5 Caldari for a little while. But we were going to do that by directly attacking the Caldari militia structures. So we've been doing that successfully. We've killed a bunch of ancillary structures, but when it comes to attacking their home, the Fortizars really are the key structures in faction warfare. The Caldari are outnumbered pretty heavily by the Galente, but the one benefit they have is they are very good at the social game. They have good relationships with the local pirates, and they have good relationships with big people like NC Dot, who showed up to our fight last night, and we had a great little brawl in Losec.
What happened there? Killer B, do you know anything about that fight?
I was kind of phased out here for a second. What fight?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, wait, were we there?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were there in Nightmares, yes.
Yeah, Nightmare Fleet.
Maybe Opner knows.
0200, I don't know. That's not my time zone.
It's mine. I was there. I was on that fleet in the most ineffective Logi ships in the universe because Macarials are still overpowered.
Oh, yeah, you poor scimitars. I guess you guys just sat there.
We were just sitting there like, we can get one. No, we can't.
Pop,
we can't.
pop,
Okay.
pop. Yeah.
We can save the Hugo. No, we can't. No, we can't. Okay.
Yeah, you guys had quite a bit of Hugans that we were trying to clear off. And I don't know if that was the right decision or not, but
it was a decision. Like there's in any fight like that, because we warped in and I'm sitting there in Logi trying to like find broadcast and do all the things, and I'm just completely missing the whole fight. But I've been on that edge over those big fights where you're just like, I can do a lot of stuff, but usually clearing support's going to be a good thing. Logi and support is going to get you into a better spot.
yeah, I mean, at post, like when we all got together about the fight after, we had a great time, by the way. It was a great fight. We thought maybe that if we had spent those arty cycles on burning more nightmares, that we might have been able to survive a little bit better. Because your nightmares came in pretty close range there, and we're burning us down quicker than our weapon cycles, you know?
Yeah, I could see that. I would have had to look at the count of the ships. Like I said, I hate trying to watch fleets from Logi. Like you don't see anything else.
Is there sort of and I know you're saying there's some issues with the mechanics of faction warfare, but it seems like some of the players in faction warfare have kind of like evolved to be quite strong groups. There's been the Galmilistan efforts in Cloud Ring. It feels like they sort of these what would be, I guess, traditionally faction warfare alliances and groups have kind of branched out a little bit and expanded their scope, which I think is a good thing if I'm assessing it right, I guess.
No, you're absolutely correct, and that's what Galmilistan fed up is a large part of. That's exactly what most of the groups in Galmil have done. We've tried to branch out, get new experiences, and push our ability to PvP a bit past the traditional faction warfare scope. And we've had great content in Nullsec, yeah.
That's really good because, I don't know, a few years ago, people have said, there's no progression from faction war into Nullsec, politics and warfare. Well, clearly there is.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I mentioned earlier, the Fozzie-Sov thing kind of fits our wheelhouse quite well, right? We grew up spinning beacons, right? We grew up small gang fighting over the structure called a plex. It's a little bit different mechanically, but the way you fight around it is more or less the same. So we found that suits our style quite well, and taking Sov was quite natural, that mechanic, and that of course drew us into other types of combat. So when that campaign in Nullsec ended and we got what we were after there, we came back to Lowsec and tried to push the envelope a little bit further for both sides. Unfortunately, Caldari militia is quite heavily outnumbered, so they, they need the equalizers. I think NC Dot was a bit much, but That was the second time we've hit a key Fortizar in the system of EHA there, and both times led to really, really great subcap fights.
Yeah, I mean, it's those challenges, that make you, progress anyway. So, okay, like you say, Caldari are a little bit weak at the moment, but then they call in NC Dot, who, quite strong compared to a traditional faction warfare alliance, but it can only bridge the gap. It can only make you stronger fighting people better than you. It's the same in EVE as in anything in sport and things like that. In my experience, you play a team that's better than you, and you progress a lot quicker than you do if you're just beating on the same team that's weaker. So
yeah, you're absolutely right. And we've grown quite a bit. Like in Nullsec, we were fighting like Tissue, who was quite a bit higher in SP than us, very good pilots, led a very good troll campaign. And then Black Legion were following up on their timers. So we were pinned against the wall there for a little while. And it was a bit rough, but it made our pilots better. Mechanically, they're better. We've pushed their envelope with their doctrine ability. So we've grown quite a bit.
Maybe studied their nerves.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Is there any more to talk about going on in Gallente and Minmatar? Sorry, Gallente and Caldari space?
Well, yeah, I think that we're going to keep pressing that narrative of trying to hit structures, because it's not something that militia really tended to do very often. Kind of, we would skirmish around a bit and leave the structures mostly alone, because Fortizar is still a tough nut to crack for us, especially when using capitals is a little bit difficult. Knowing that maybe NC's hanging around. But we're going to continue to push the envelope and get big fights like that. We thoroughly enjoyed the fight last night.
Great. All right. Should know that Dawn of Liberation, Minmatar versus Amarr live event is coming up. We'll have more on that next week. For now, we're out of time. I want to thank everybody for showing up today. We will see you on the battlefield. Do we have one last report coming up from the battlefield where Test lost supers?
I think it was Brave. It was Brave guys. But yeah,
Legacy Brave supers. Guys.
Yeah, Brave.
Yeah,
Brave
it was
supers.
Brave. Well, there is a report. There's a little bit of an AAR that got pasted in here, and I'll quote from it for you. So we were moving some of our caps toward our staging system for the war, and upon jump in the 3L3N system in Tenerifis, we got instantly tackled by Hictors. Our in-sino was blapped, and our new sino went up on a dread, but faxes couldn't get in. But by that time, PL had dropped supers and titans on us. Good fight, all well played, was the quote.
First cat.
Yeah, so it's a result of the changes a few months ago with Citadel tethering after signing in. By the sounds of things, they signed in. They have a 30-second cooldown before they tether, and you're vulnerable to be tackled. And it seems like, I guess Skill U and were the ones to really do the important bit, or do the tackling, which I would argue is the trickier part rather than the part we played. I actually jumped in as well, which is why I went a bit quiet there.
Yeah, there was a message about logging off your Titan while you're on the show.
Yeah, it's safe.
Awesome. Yeah, I did that during 9-Tech-4. My Titan drifted off the Keep Star. People had to yell at me through the program that I was doing. But yeah, that's very interesting. First catch of the day for PL. Looks like there'll be more of this kind of a thing now that PL has their super cap forces down here in the Tenerifis area. So looking forward to what happens. We will cover more of it next week. But I want to thank everybody for showing up this week. And remember to visit talkinginstations.com to support the podcast. Give us your ideas on Talking in Stations Discord. This is where we gather. After every show, we pile into public and people hang around. And so we'll do that later today, right after the show. Thanks, everybody. that's it for this week. We will see you next week on Talking in Stations.
Bye.
Bye.
I have pants on. What are you talking about?